Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome back to another episode of Corpse Club, the official podcast for DailyDead.com. My name is Heather Wixson, and for this week, we are going to be diving into Ti West's latest horror movie, X. And I am so thrilled this week to be joined by two of my favorite ladies. First up, we have Emily von Seele. And I love to say your name, so I was so excited. I did it right again, right?
You did it perfect, Heather. Thank you.
Yay. Sorry. I always get it, I struggled with it on our first couple of episodes. So I'm so proud of myself now. But I'm so thrilled to have you back, Emily. And for this episode, we're joined by a brand new voice over at Daily Dead, and that is Michelle Swope. Hello, Michelle.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you are so welcome. And we're so glad to be having you not only on the show, but for all you've been doing on Daily Dead the last few months.
Oh, thank you. I am so thrilled to be a part of Daily Dead.
Yeah, you're pretty much the only one that's got all your South by stuff done so far. I'm the slacker over here. And you making me look bad, Michelle.
I'm sorry.
Bravo, Michelle. Bravo.
Emily does the same when we tag team for festivals too. So, I think we're just the proof is just I'm a terrible journalist and I take on too much. And I think that's
No,
you're kind of the best out there.
Yeah.
No.
You are.
I work a lot. So let's just put it that way. So anyway. So yeah, I really, because this is such a monumental moment, I think, for a lot of people, because one, it's been almost 10 years since we've had a Ti West horror movie. Two, we had, he's working with A24 of all companies, which is pretty awesome. And then, three, he's got this amazing cast with this really unexpected story. So I wanted to make sure that we took a moment to kind of celebrate it. And so I guess first and foremost, we can just sort of dive into our initial thoughts. So I know we're all fans. Emily, was this what you were expecting going into it, or was it completely different?
I think it was exactly what I was expecting, in that I knew that from the trailer, I should not expect anything. I know that when I walk into a Ti West movie, I should just kind of leave all expectations at the door, because whatever was advertised is probably not exactly what's going to be showing up on screen. And with all of the kind of deliberate steps he takes in his filmmaking and the way he so consciously lays out the story, there was a moment where I'm like a third of the way in, I'm like, I am sitting here watching a new Ti West movie and I can feel it. And I'm so happy.
How about for you, Michelle? Was this kind of did this sort of meet your expectations or exceed them?
It probably exceeded my expectations. I honestly kind of sat there in awe throughout the movie, for a few reasons, which I guess we can get into in a minute. But yeah, I know that the trailer was probably going to be, misleading. And so I was trying not to base too much on that. I feel like with the trailer, they tried to maybe intentionally make it look a little like Texas Chainsaw, maybe to make people think it's going to be like that. And it totally isn't like that. And just, I was really blown away by the fact that it actually felt like I was watching a movie from the 1970s.
Yeah. I
mean, it has such an authentic feel. It really does. So definitely exceeded my expectation.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. For those of you listening, obviously we're probably going to get into some spoilers here. So I should warn you first and foremost, if you haven't seen X yet, there's going to be aspects of this that we're going to have to talk about, because I think there's some really interesting themes to dive into here, and it's going to be a little spoilery. So if you haven't seen it, I suggest, pause this, go watch the movie, and then come back and see it, or come back and finish up the episode. Because I think for me, the biggest surprise and the thing that really impressed me the most about this was, the dual performances from Mia Goth, because I didn't know that was going to be her coming into this. I didn't know why that was the way it was. And now in retrospect, when you kind of think about the ideas that Ti is exploring here in terms of getting older and how we value ourselves through our identities and our looks and things like that, I actually think putting, Mia in both of these roles was a genius move on Ty. Plus, the fact is, we also now have a prequel coming for her older character in the movie, which is like, what? It's already done. It's already finished shooting, and it's like going to be out, I think, later this year.
So excited about that. That was like the cherry on top of the sundae.
Yeah, they actually showed like a little teaser trailer at the end of X.
Which is, I'm so bummed because my versions didn't have that.
Oh no!
So now I have to go see it again so I can go see the teaser.
Oh, bummer! You're gonna have to go see it again.
It's after the credits, though. We always sit through credits because we're weird like that. But so we were so glad we did this time because we're like, oh my God. And of course, my husband was like, what is this? I was like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, he's already made a prequel. So yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, I was really bummed because, when they were doing the junket and stuff, Ty wasn't talking about the prequel yet. And in fact, it was when I was doing the initial interview for Fangoria, and this was back in like February, or it might have been the end of January. Gosh, time has no meaning anymore. Actually, yeah, it was the last week of January. And it just sort of came up in our conversation. And I was like, excuse me, what now? So like, I'm really bummed that they couldn't include that because they didn't want to ruin it for the press there because they wanted to reveal it during South by Southwest, which I totally get because that was like sort of the big first moment, for the movie and things like that. But, not that I have any problems going and supporting it and seeing it again. I'm just waiting because our drive-in has it playing as a double feature. So I want to see if it's going to play with something else, maybe just kind of mix things up a little bit. I would sit through it twice. But I don't know if my other half wants to.
Yeah, I'm dying to see it again.
Me too. Yeah. And Heather, going back to what you were saying about Mia Goth's performances, she was just amazing, like all the way through. And it took me a while to figure out that she was in the makeup and playing the older character, partly because in the beginning, he was so intentional about shooting around it and making sure that the character was in shadow and not, lingering too much. But then when I started to kind of clue in, I kind of shut my brain off to it because I'm like, no, this is going to kind of keep me guessing at what's happening. And I just want the story to unfold and I just want to take it in step by step. So I want to go back and see it, full knowledge of what's happening on screen and be able to appreciate it that way too.
I had no idea that she was playing the older role until after I saw the movie. And when I found out, I think my brain exploded because it all makes sense, as far as what happens in X and as far as her being in the prequel and as far as the themes that are explored in X, it all just made sense, So that was really cool because I had no idea.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think what's really great about this too is like, a lot of us are showing up because of, it's a horror movie. So of course we're showing up for that stuff. And, it's got sort of my favorite word for this movie has just been titillating. I've been throwing that around just so much because we don't get a whole lot of sexy horror movies anymore.
Right.
Everything is kind of prudish. And so, I think a lot of people are showing up for the gore, the violence, the sex, and that's totally cool. But I think for me, it's the way that Ty and this cast were able to find the humanity in these characters that made me fall in love with them in ways like I wasn't expecting. Like going into this, it's everybody who's in the main cast, like I absolutely adore them. Like Martin Henderson, fantastic, brilliant, love him. Jenna Ortega has sort of become horror's it girl these days. Brittany Snow, I will unabashedly proclaim my love for Hairspray until I take my last breath on this planet. Mia Goth, I will tell anybody and everybody who will listen to me to watch A Cure for Wellness. Because to me, in that movie, she blew me away. And then her in Suspiria was fantastic. And then of course, Kid Cudi or Scott Mescudi. We're huge fans of his. In fact, we saw him in concert, I want to say like in 2012, and it was definitely a top 5 concert for me since I've moved to Los Angeles. And that was just like an amazing show. And to see him growing as an actor as well has been really fun because I liked him in the Bill and Ted movie, but I didn't love him because he felt a little aloof. And I thought here as Jackson, he just felt like such a natural. And then I also think Owen Campbell ends up being sort of the biggest surprise for me. And I'm sure, because I know both of you keep up with horror and stuff like that. But he was in Super Dark Times, which I really loved. But last year he was in My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. And I thought he was so damn good in that movie.
He's amazing in that.
Amazing.
Yes.
So like the way that they were just able to bring such a humanity and such a real true affection between these characters. To me, that's what really hooked me in, was just that like I genuinely loved every single one of these people. And I was genuinely upset when they had to die, but they did it like champs.
Yes. And that's something that I really love about Ty West and his storytelling. He really puts a lot into the characters. Like with the two leads in The Innkeepers, like I don't care if they find ghosts or not. I just want to hang out with them at their, the last days of this hotel before it closes down. And I want to see what they're doing. And I want to be friends with both of them.
Yeah.
Well, I have to agree. This cast is just amazing. The person who stands out the most for me, though, for some reason, is Brittany Snow. I haven't seen everything she's done, but of what I have seen, I really hadn't seen anything that I really liked, for whatever reason. She blew me away in X. I mean, just a phenomenal performance for Brittany Snow.
Her character has so much confidence, but it's legitimate confidence. It's not like a put on, and it's not a show she's doing for her friends and the people around her. This is legitimately who she is. And she walks around and carries all that power with her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think
she has the bless your heart line, which
of course. It's such a Southern thing too.
Appeals to me.
But I genuinely love the sort of like relationship that she shares with Jackson in this movie. Like Bobby Lynn and Jackson, to me, like end up sort of becoming this big surprise, because like we start off with obviously Wayne and Maxine have something going on, but I think for me, and of course, there's Jenna Ortega's character, Lorraine, and Owen's character, RJ, they're together. But for me, Brittany Snow and Kid Cudi's character's relationship is really interesting to me, because like there's parts of it where like you could see that they sort of shut down their feelings for each other when they're like shooting the movie. But then also like there's like this genuine like back and forth that they have. I just don't know how they pulled it off. Like if you were to tell me that like legitimately that like they were in a real life relationship, I'd believe you. But I don't think that's the case. So I don't want to start any rumors or anything like that. I think Brittany Snow might actually be married with kids at this point. I don't even know. But yeah, like it was just their back and forth was so great. And I don't know how you guys felt, as I'm a little bit older, a little bit more, I don't know, hippie-ish, I guess. But the landslide moment for me genuinely makes me emotional. And what's even stranger, and this was so funny, on my way to my screening, the first time I saw it, I was in the car and I've been listening to like this 90s playlist because I was kind of in a 90s mood. And about 3 minutes before I got to the screening room, the Smashing Pumpkins Landslide cover came on, and which I love. I'll pretty much listen to any version of that song. And I was like, I was just like, oh, this is nice, kind of easing me into my screening. And then when Britney sings it in the movie, and it's gorgeous, I was just like, the first time I had goosebumps, the second time I cried. I just think it's a really beautiful moment. And it's like such an interesting, like pivotal moment, because as soon as that moment hits and is gone, like the entire movie changes.
Yes. Oh my God. That's a really good point. Like you, I loved the scene, and her rendition of it was just so beautiful. And it was nice to kind of just take a moment to put a pause on the action while we take a moment to just kind of, feel what's going on with these characters and their lives and how these themes are starting to gel. But you're right, it is a turning point in the film, and everything changes once that wraps up.
Yeah, I agree. And I hadn't really thought about that.
I hadn't either, but God.
Yeah, because even after that moment, that's when like Jenna's character is like, you know what? I want to be in the movie. And you're like, wait, what? Because like right before that, she's just like, how can you guys do this? And you know what? And I think what's interesting too, with that whole exchange that they had between those characters when they're sort of sitting around after the first day of shooting, you know, Jenna's character, Lorraine, like, you know, you can tell she feels like an outsider. She doesn't quite understand the world that she's in. And I like the fact that Ty West, you know, in her asking these questions, didn't try to demonize her character either, because I get it. Like, if you're a young kid and this is sort of your entry point into it, you know, you may not understand why people do what you know, this kind of stuff. And you may not understand how people can sort of compartmentalize, you know, their real life versus their life on screen and things like that. And, you know, it would have been so easy to kind of come down harder on that character in that moment. But that whole like back and forth, like, you know, I just thought was a really clever way of sort of talking about that without demonizing anybody from either side of that conversation. And ultimately also sort of giving the audience a little something extra to think about.
I totally agree with that. And the thing is, this is going to sound ridiculous, I know, because I'm talking about a slasher movie, but I firmly believe that Ty West put so much thought into each character, into the relationships in the movie, into the different themes that are, you know, the aging, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute. And you know what I mean? Like, he put so much thought into it, and it shows. And I think that's really cool because you don't see that, I don't think, very often in horror, and certainly not in slashers. I mean, that's how I see it. I don't know if you agree.
I completely agree. And also
fully agree.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is, like, weirdly enough, when I was actually in Austin, I was kind of flipping around cable one night when I was working in my hotel room, and Boogie Nights happened to be on. And of course, there's a lot of parallels because, you know, it's the porn industry and things like that. And I've always thought that Boogie Nights, you know, while it's a brilliantly made movie on a technical level, some of the stuff that they did in that movie still blows my mind. But I don't necessarily think that it comes off completely positive about working in the porn industry. I mean, it's very blunt about a lot of it, and it's very confrontational in a lot of ways, as it should be, because the things that some of these characters are doing aren't great, you know, but this to me was sort of the antithesis in a lot of ways, where it was like, I really appreciated that these characters, like, they were in control of their situation. They had certain lines that they would draw. And it didn't come away where it was just like, these people aren't necessarily getting killed because they're doing pornography. They're getting killed because there's a horny old lady who has been doing this kind of violence tied to sex for like decades now, apparently. Which I thought was really interesting. And, you know, and again, when, you know, we've all been watching horror movies for decades now, so we're pretty hip to the quote unquote rules. I like that in a lot of ways that this sort of defies those rules, that they're not being punished because they're having sex. This is actually just like a super horny old lady who just can't control herself and ultimately ends up acting violently.
Right. And she's stuck in, you know, what she perceives to be the tragedy of her own aging, of her own, you know, body getting older and becoming quote unquote less attractive and unwanted, and, you know, all of the things that society puts on us as we age, and she's lashing out. So the pathos of, you know, the quote unquote punishment for sex that we're used to seeing in slashers is flipped on its head.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's, you can look at it from both, you know, perspectives. From Pearl's, how she sees it, you know, she's obviously very sad about getting old, and she feels like she's not desired anymore. But X also plays on the very real fear of aging. It makes old people scary. You know, you can look at it both ways. And I came out of the movie just blown away for so many reasons, but I was just like, I cannot believe that the big reveal was what it was. You know, I never would have expected that. It's just, it's crazy, but it's also really awesome. And there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah. And I think too, like, as somebody who's sort of grappling with herself becoming older, I think to me, that's why somebody like a character like Pearl to me, like, oh, she's very much the villain in this movie. And her husband is the enabler and sort of definitely the accomplice and everything. But ultimately, I didn't hate her because I got it. Like, I understood where she was coming from in a lot of ways, because like there's a certain point where like you're like, am I still desirable? Do people still care about me in that way? And we can all like kid ourselves to say like that stuff doesn't matter, but I think it does to most people. Like, we want to be desired in some way, sexually or not. And so I think for me to add that little layer to the character of Pearl, she's just not a crazy old lady. Like there's something real. There's a real fear that drives her in what she does, which I think is just really fascinating. And I cannot wait for that prequel.
I agree with everything you said because I'm older as well. So yeah, I could totally, relate to Pearl in some ways. I'm not going around murdering people because I'm not 20 anymore, but
but I've been tempted.
Yes. Okay.
I live in LA. There's a lot of image out here. So,
cards on the table. We all get it.
I've probably been tempted too at some point, but I really could relate to her as, as a person, as a woman, getting older and everything that goes with that. Yeah, of course I look at 20-year-olds and go, oh, I remember when, my skin used to look like that, or, whatever. And so it's relatable in so many ways, which I think makes it really, really cool.
Yeah. And especially there's that moment after she does her first kill, when after she gets done murdering RJ, and she's like in the headlights of the truck and everything is colored red because there's just a shit ton fountain of blood. But then everything softens and she takes a moment and lifts up her arms and kind of starts dancing. And for a few seconds, you see her kind of embracing that youth that she lost and getting to be one with the person that, somewhere is still inside her, but she can't move as well as she used to. And, she's not as young as she used to be, but she feels it for just a couple seconds. And you really connect with that as an audience member. Like it really brings you in and helps you to identify with the character and what she's feeling.
Yeah, I definitely. And I also want to say, for as many times as we've heard Don't Fear the Reaper in horror movies, for like the last 40 something years, probably since Halloween did it the first time, I'm just excited that we have a really awesome kill scene to Don't Fear the Reaper finally.
Yeah!
That was gnarly. And if you thought like Ty was going to hold back and give you sort of restrained, artful kills in this movie, like no, like RJ, man, and it just keeps going, which is like, you're like, okay, this is probably, he's definitely dead, and you're like, no, we're gonna stab him about 7 more times in the throat just to be sure, right? And you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't mess with the elderly, guys. This is the lesson, I think. Don't mess with the horny elderly people out there. They'll get you. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, did you guys have like sort of favorite kills in this movie?
Probably, oh my gosh, I like them all, but I have to say the one that I was kind of fascinated with, which maybe was in a way, maybe the simplest, I don't know, when Martin Henderson dies, because it didn't like connect with my brain at first that what was happening was a pitchfork. I thought like she'd stuck like a stick or something through the hole, like my brain hadn't realized what that was until she came around the corner. And then I was like, wait a minute. That's something I don't think I've seen before, where, she just happens to have a pitchfork and sticks it through the 3 holes in the barn. Like, what? I mean, I'm pretty sure I've never seen that before. And I watch, as you know, a lot of horror. I just thought that was a really cool, creative kill.
Do you feel like those holes were something that they built into the barn, like Pearl and her husband? because they fit the pitchfork so perfectly as like their way of like doing that kind of a kill.
Yeah, maybe.
It's like I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm like, wow, that worked out so perfectly. Like the holes were like lined up, and I was like, is that cinematic or is that purposeful towards like what the characters have done?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I was so fascinated by that kill in particular.
Like it makes a certain amount of sense though. If you're going to lock somebody in your barn and there's going to be a series of holes, they're going to look through them. And therefore their face is going to be in perfect pitchfork range.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess if you're going to try to kill multiple people and you know that you kind of have a thing about it, you might make it easier on yourself by making like a barn trap.
I like your thinking there, Emily.
Thank you. It's always important to be prepared, ladies.
Yes. Did you have a favorite kill, Emily?
Oh my God, RJ.
Oh yeah.
It was just so brutal and so messy. And I think my second favorite was like simple and you knew it was coming, but the gator kill, because anytime an alligator jumps out of the water and just grabs somebody, we're having fun.
Yeah, I agree with you there. In fact, it's interesting because like, Michelle, you mentioned like the trailer kind of gave off these Texas Chainsaw vibes, and I've seen so many people continuously going back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre when they're referencing this movie. And I totally get it. It's the 70s, it's Texas. There are a couple shots that like, oh yeah, this could come right out of a Texas Chainsaw movie, no problem. But I think for me, there was a couple different things that I sort of felt were sort of referenced. I think one, other early Tobe Hooper movies were kind of an influence, which I think Eaten Alive was probably sort of a tie into the gator moment. I also got some really like sort of older Wes Craven vibes, because the scene when Mia is swimming in the lake and they do that gorgeous overhead shot, it reminded me really of like Last House on the Left. Because there's that sequence, and I forget the character's name, when she's swimming and, you know, and they shoot her and stuff like that when she's in the water. So to me, like I was getting those vibes, but that kill for me, one, I love it. But it actually, because I just rewatched it because the Blu-ray just came out, but it actually gave me alligator vibes, because there's this scene in Alligator where there's like a birthday party going on, and there's a bunch of kids, and they like basically put this kid, like another kid, like on the like diving board of a pool, and the gator's in the pool, and then they just push him off and he starts flailing around thinking everything's fine, and then there's a gator, and that kid's dead. And so that whole sequence like totally gave me alligator vibes. But like, again, you have a movie about crazy killer horny old people, but there's gators too. Like, you're not safe anywhere you go in this movie.
Yeah.
Texas is dangerous, especially in 1979, apparently. So yeah, I think Brittany's death was probably my favorite as well. I was actually really sad about Wayne, because I wasn't expecting to love that character as much as I did, because, you know, again, we've seen other movies that have sort of dove into the adult entertainment world, and we've seen producer type characters usually portrayed a certain way. And Wayne isn't like that at all. Mm-hmm. He's actually like, he's almost kind of like this like cheerleader in a way, or like, I think it might have even come up like in our conversation of time, like he's almost like a football coach. Where he's like, all right, guys, we're going to go out there and we're going to make the best adult movie ever. You got this, you know, everything's going to be great. Like, he's not the typical guy who's trying to like screw over his talent and screw them over either. And like, it was just a really interesting thing. So like his whole sequence in that barn, first of all, you got to put some shoes on. Like, if you don't want to put pants on, you got to put shoes on. You can't just be walking around in a barn with shoes. And that foot scene, I was just like, oh no.
Yeah.
I was like, oh God, we're going to do foot trauma over here, which is always one of my fun little things where it's like, oh Jesus, okay.
Oh, that happened.
Yeah. And then, you know, adding insult to injury, like here he is, his like foot is gushing blood. And he's like, all right, now I have no eyeballs. That's great. Everything's going great for Wayne.
Yeah, I think I love that character. And I think that it's kind of a testament to Martin Henderson and the way he played him and probably some of his natural charm. But, based on how we've seen that type of character portrayed in other films, we walk into that movie ready to hate him. Because that guy is supposed to be a sleazeball. He's supposed to be abusive and sexist and a big pain in the ass. And the fact that we do come around to loving him is, I think it was, I don't want to say it was a big lift for Henderson because I don't know, but I think that he did a good job in making sure that he subverted that expectation.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And again, I think it's just like the genius of Ty where, he was all about subverting every expectation. Cause like you said, like this trailer was like, so Texas Chainsaw Live. So I'm ready for cannibals. I'm ready for, weird chase scenes with chainsaws. And we've got none of that here. It's just a completely different animal altogether. But ultimately, if you told me this movie had been released in the 70s, I would believe it. And that is not something I would say is easy to pull off these days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
I agree.
Yeah. So I'm curious, for the both of you, like, we just talked about Wade a little bit. Did he end up sort of being your favorite character, or was there somebody else that you sort of connected with the most?
Gosh, that's so hard because I love
hard.
all the characters. It's really hard. Oh my goodness. I guess Brittany Snow, if I had to pick one, because again, she just really blew me away in this movie. For a lot of reasons. You mentioned the landslide moment is so beautiful. And her character is just so interesting, I guess if I had to pick one character I wanted to be like, I would pick her. Because like you said, she's very confident and she's funny and she's in control of her life. And so yeah, I would say Brittany Snow.
I would probably agree. I like what was Jenna Ortega's character, Lynette? Lorraine, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I like the way that she has this innate vulnerability, but also this curiosity that, helps her kind of weather this new situation. And she's willing to ask these questions of these people. But I think that Brittany Snow, just the way she carries herself and the way she pulls off that character is just amazing.
Yeah. Sorry. We just had the Fast and the Furious happen out here right in front of my house. Dear Lord. I was like, oh, that won't be that loud. Oh no, never mind. Sorry. That's
vroom, vroom.
Yeah. Dominic Toretto is on the prowl again, guys. Yeah, what's funny for me is like, I think the first time I saw it, I was totally head over heels for Brittany Snow as Bobby Lynn. And then the second time I watched Mia a little bit more because I realized sort of these parallels between Maxine and Pearl and was trying to sort of pick up on those vibes anymore. And I think there's something really fascinating about this girl who we find out by the end of the movie, she's somebody who basically, her dad is a preacher and he's basically sort of leading this religious, cult, I guess at this point. Like, I think back then there was a lot of cultish aspects to a lot of different sort of religious sects that were popping up. And how she was just like, I'm a effing star. And, and there was just sort of these things that were kind of driving her. And her determination, I think for me, just really impressed me a lot. Like that character, like I kind of, as much as I wish I could be Bobby Lynn, I'm never going to be a bombshell, but as somebody who tries to just be determined to like get my work done and do the things that I love doing, like, it's like, yeah, I want to be a little bit like Maxine, maybe not having, using cocaine, let's leave that part to the side. But, I'm just like, yeah, I get her. And I related to her a lot more the second time than I did the first for sure. But, I think the character of Lorraine is fascinating too, because I think for a lot of us who aren't in, sex work culture and things like that, in modern times, like you can sometimes sort of question things. And I like that, Lorraine ends up sort of having this epiphany of like, this isn't something that defines you as a person. It's just something you can go and do and have fun with, and, make the most of your assets, if you will, while you have them. I'm like, oh, maybe I should have appreciated my 20s more. Although it was funny, I think I felt older in my 20s than I did in my 30s, if that makes any kind of sense. So, but it's just such a lot of fascinating stuff back and forth that it's one of these, like, I could probably watch this movie like 10 more times and still find fun little things to sort of pick apart about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it a second time, because it's amazing, but I really want to kind of be in the moment with a lot of these different character interactions and how they, relate to one another, and how when Lorraine's getting curious, she, is willing to kind of examine this from a new perspective, and where does that lead?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing it a second time. As soon as it was over, I wanted to see it again.
Yes.
I think that I spent a large part of the movie just being in awe of the way that Ty West shot the movie. That just really stood out to me so much. I think, Heather, you mentioned the scene with Mia Goth in the water from overhead. That is such a gorgeous scene, the way it's shot, and all the side by sides that went together. And yeah, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it again.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because his DP for the movie is somebody that he's actually worked with quite a bit before, which I didn't realize going into it, but it was the same. His name is Elliot Rocket, and he also worked on Innkeepers and House of the Devil.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow.
So I thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
I also have to say, also too, in relation to Jenna Ortega's character, I don't know about you both, but I literally, the entire time I was watching the movie, I just kept thinking about her character in Scream, talking about how she only liked like elevated horror, and then like named off all these A24 movies. And I was like, oh, you were just auditioning for this, weren't you? Like from the gate, weren't you? You were just doing this the whole time.
Yeah.
That is career planning.
It was like, oh, she knew what she was doing. So it was funny, because even when it ended, because there's a moment at the end of Scream when she was just like, I still prefer the Babadook. And I have very complicated feelings about the Babadook. But so it's become a joke in her house, where it was like, as soon as the movie ended, Brian looks at me and he's just like, Babadook. And I was like, I know. So yeah, it's become sort of a fun little moment for us. But like, wow, like, and it was funny even too, because I remember one of the times we went and saw Scream at the drive-in, they had the X trailer before it. And
oh, wow.
And I was just like, wow, this is so strange, because like in about 3 minutes, they're going to start talking about elevated horror or whatever. And here we are watching a trailer for A24 before Scream, which I just thought was genius in so many ways.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, do you guys feel like, because I mean, this is a conversation that so many people have, and I don't even know if there's a right or wrong answer to it. And I'm sort of somebody who doesn't like to just use trivial terminology, but do you feel like this is elevated horror? Do you feel like elevated horror is a thing? Like, because I mean that, I look at this versus something like, and I don't say this as somebody who disliked it, but it's like versus the new Texas Chainsaw. Like, do you feel like this is elevated versus something like that, or versus Scream 2022 or other things going on? Like, I don't know that I have a perfect answer for it, but it's curious to me, because I do think that there's parts of this that does elevate it in a way against other things that we're seeing in the genre.
I don't think elevated horror is a thing. And I really don't. I don't think it's a thing. I think that this movie is elevated because it's just a better movie than other horror movies. Some other, that's how I see it. I'm just going to be honest about it. That's how I feel. And the new Texas Chainsaw, I didn't think was a good movie. That's just, my personal opinion. So yes, in that way, X is elevated above that movie. I mean, I think yes, X deals with, all these themes, different themes, and yes, the way it's shot, and somehow he managed to capture, that exact aesthetic of a 70s horror movie and all that. But I just think it makes it a better movie.
I have a hard time with the phrase elevated horror because however it started out, these things just kind of, come up in one article and then catch on, but it's come to mean a subsection of horror that's inherently better than the rest of horror. Like, you can shit on horror all day, but if you like elevated horror, then that makes you some sort of, you're above it all as a film goer. And I resent that it's something that has driven a wedge within the horror community like that, because I think there's really good horror movies, and then there's really fun horror movies. And yeah, sometimes there's stinker horror movies, and that's okay. I think that this is a film that it understands the genres that it's taking on. And like he's done before, West has intentionally kind of flipped those genres and tried to make them into something new and tried to play with those tropes. But I don't know that doing that inherently makes it a smarter or a better horror movie than Malignant. It's just, it's in a different category, Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And also, I'm somebody who's been fighting the terminology torture porn for like over a decade now, because I don't think that's a real thing.
It just feels like we find these words that allow us to dump on some categories and lift others up, when we could just really say that was a really good movie and that one really wasn't so good, but that's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like I fell sort of in the middle on Texas Chainsaw 2022. Like, there's things about it that I really pissed me off. And there's things about it that I cackled like, a total horror hound over, so it's like, but I would never put the two in the same category. But yeah, I was just curious because that's of course like this big thing these days. And I honestly, I think the conversation really started to kind of come up, like, I would say probably around the time like The Witch came out, because it just felt very different than a lot of things that were coming out at that time. And then of course, once Hereditary hit, like, then you just couldn't escape the term. And then Midsummer, like, just felt like the drum kept getting beat.
Right.
And I'm just like, and I like those movies, but I'm imploring people to please watch more movies at this point. If I have to see one more think piece about Midsummer, like, I get it. I'm just like, gosh, there's so many other movies you could talk about out there.
Right. And there are so many horror films that have, gone to bat on political issues and on emotional well-being and on psychological development and the things we do to ourselves. But it's important to not overlook those too, because it's always been part of the genre.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I was thinking about it too, because I was like, okay, so if for argument's sake, if we're going to call X an elevated horror movie, so, and like, what if this movie came out in the 70s? And I was thinking about like what other horror movies from that decade would be considered elevated. And I was like, well, of course you'd have Rosemary's Baby. That would be one of them. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know if you would consider Exorcist elevated or not, because it had such a pop appeal to it at that time. But I would think like my other one that I came up with was maybe Invasion of the Body Snatchers 78 might also be in contention. But I was like, okay, so if we're going to be dumb and we're going to apply this terminology to other movies of that era, I was like, what would be elevated horror from the 1970s? But I will say too, that as somebody like who has, I grew up in the 80s. So of course 80s horror means a lot to me. Like, just sort of rediscovering 70s horror to me has just been like, over the last year and a half, has been phenomenally fun. And I think it's a decade that kind of gets overlooked. And I kind of hope that if nothing else, this becomes a catalyst where people start to go back and they start to watch things from that decade more so than just Texas Chainsaw or Exorcist. You know, they kind of, because there's some real gems out there in terms of some fantastic movies from that decade.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's great stuff. But now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like if X had been released in the 70s, it would have just straight up been branded pornography because of the subject matter.
Yeah.
I don't think we were yet in a place yet where we could legitimately have a film about porn stars and take it seriously. It would have just been, this is perversion and crap, and keep your children away from it because it's got the devil in it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely. But like with what you just said, Heather, I agree. Just, you know, I wish people would watch more movies, because movies have been doing all the things that elevated horror supposedly does forever. You know, it's not a new concept, you know, for a movie to be thoughtful or to examine certain themes. That's been happening forever.
Yeah, I think, and part of it feels like maybe like a lot of people think like in the 80s that we sort of stepped away from it. But honestly, like a lot of those movies, they just sort of wrapped them up in like glossier packaging.
Yeah.
So, you know, so it wasn't like, you know, you watch Poltergeist and you're like, oh, that was a really fun, like supernatural movie that made you, you know, as a kid, never want to watch TV again. But like, there's some other things going on in that movie beyond just sort of the, you know, ooh, it's scary and they're taking Carol Ann kind of stuff. You know, or you know, obviously one of the big ones is like They Live from John Carpenter. But I would argue even something, you know, I'm trying to think of like another good one. Like, I would even say like Christine is like a really interesting one to me, because even though it's based on like a Stephen King novel, I think the way that Carpenter portrays it is, you know, it's a really interesting disconnect between teen culture and their parents and things like that was really prevalent, you know, throughout the 1980s. And I thought we saw that reflected in a lot of different movies. But yeah, it was just one of those, I was like, yeah, so if we're going to be weirdos and be like, all right, let's talk about 1970s elevated horror. And I was like going through stuff and I was like, would Black Christmas be considered elevated horror? No, I don't think so. Even though, you know, it elevates my heart rate when I watch it. I'm like, I don't think Halloween would be considered it.
I love Black Christmas.
Oh, so good. But yeah, it was just kind of fun to kind of go through and like think about like, you know, if we were going to apply this terminology in retrospect, like what would be the movies that would sort of fall into that category. But if nothing else, I really do hope people start to kind of go back to the 70s, because like right now 90s are really hot and I get it. I love it, you know. And I've been somebody who's been a long time proponent of the fact that there is a lot of really great 90s horror out there, despite what a lot of people will say. But yeah, I feel like we should go back to the 70s for a little bit.
Yeah, 70s were great. And I think, I don't know, over the past couple of years, I've been able to watch a lot of 70s horror via Shudder. And just having that available to me has really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that we just don't talk about anymore. Stuff that's not, you know, the big titles like Texas Chainsaw, but are still, you know, equally terrifying and fascinating and part of the landscape.
Yeah, I would agree. Also, I would say in complementary to Shudder, another one that's really come through for me a lot is Tubi.
I've heard they've got a good catalog. I haven't checked it out yet.
Yeah.
Though.
God, you could literally lose like 3 hours of your life just going through their horror section. No joke. Anytime I have to do, oh gosh. All right, guys. Sorry. Guys, please.
Oh no.
Oh, geez. Anyway, well, now they're all worked up. But like, I seriously, like, you could go through their entire horror section and maybe not even get to the full run of it. So, they are a godsend too. Guys, please. They get so worked up over everything in this house. So,
well, you mentioned Tubi, and clearly they're huge fans.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things on there that, like, you know, they're like little, you know, weird obscure movies that you would like think like, oh, this isn't going to be anywhere, and it's on Tubi. So in fact, it was like I just had to rewatch I Madman, and I was like, oh gosh, I'm like, I hope I can find this because I don't have like a disc of it or anything. And sure enough, there it was on Tubi. Leaves at the end of the month though. So if anybody's never caught up with I Madman, I highly recommend it. You'll find it on Tubi for free.
they have a great horror selection, and it's worth sitting through the commercials. They're not that
Their
long.
commercials are great compared to other ones, because like you kind of get like 2 or 3 like 30-second breaks like in the first hour, and then they kind of give you like a 45-minute stretch where they don't interrupt you, and then you'll usually get like one more break before the movie ends.
Yeah, they're really good about it.
So yeah, they're, now that we've done our advertising for Tubi, sponsor us, Tubi.
Tubi and Shudder.
Yeah, I mean, Shudder for me is like sort of a no-brainer as a horror fan. But I also know people sometimes have budgetary restrictions and stuff like that. So I always try to give people a free option if they ever need one. So because I get it. But Shudder is also like $6 a month or something like that. So
it's super cheap.
Apparently, like all we do is like this generation's all we do is like, eat avocado toast anyway. So just skip 3 days of avocado toast and you're cool. You can get Shudder.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Is there anything else about X that we haven't talked about that you wanted to mention before we wrapped up?
I feel like I could talk about it all day.
I know, I do too. Like I was telling you, I think before we started, my husband and I have talked about this movie every day since we saw it. We saw it like 4 or 5 days ago. Literally every day. We've had at least one conversation about this movie and how both of us like it more as time goes on. So yeah.
I am right there with you.
And just being able to, the way everything is right now and all of the stress everyone's been under for the past couple of years, being able to go to the movies and see something truly unique and eye-opening and exciting like this, it's something that I always look forward to, and I'm really grateful when it happens. So yeah, it was a great experience, great film. Yay, Ty West. Please don't take such a long hiatus again.
I know now we're going to get 2 movies from him in 1 year. It's like, he's like, I'm going to take like 10 years away and then I'm going to come back and give you guys 2 movies.
I'm back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this, for both of you, does this kind of rank at the top of your Ty West filmography rankings then?
Oh yeah, definitely for me. Yeah.
I think so.
It
might have to be tied with House of the Devil because I love that movie so much, but it's definitely up there.
Yeah, it was one of those coming in. So I was like, well, I mean, like for me, is anything gonna like top House of the Devil? And I'm also somebody who's a huge fan of The Sacrament, just because I love cult movies, and I just think that movie Vinnie Jones is like so brilliant in that movie and terrifying.
Wow.
Yeah, it is.
So I was like, I'll see how it goes. And I was like, when I walked out the first time, I was like, yep, this is it. This is my favorite Ty West movie now. So it felt pretty good. I was just like, all right. So, but also I do want to point out, like, Ty West also directed one of my very favorite episodes of the Scream TV series. So, I knew he had it in him. Keep going.
He's done a lot of TV, I think, in recent years that I wasn't aware of until now, the past few days, since I've been talking to my husband so much about it. I don't know if you've seen, there's a Netflix show called Chambers.
I haven't seen that one.
There was only one season because you know how Netflix has a habit of canceling their horror shows. But anyway, we loved it. And we just found out that Ty West directed, I think, maybe 2 episodes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which kind of makes me want to go back and watch it again. But yeah, we really enjoyed it. And I think he did an episode or 2 of them, the recent crime series, Wayward Pines, which we also really liked when it was on. Yeah, he's done a bunch of really cool episodic directing.
Yeah.
In the past years.
It's also, I also feel bad because, like, Winnie, please, for the love of God. One of the things that, like, I always forget that he did In a Valley of Violence in 2016, which I'm not a huge Western person, but I really, really dug that movie a lot. And I think it just kind of genuinely, like, sort of got overlooked. But for anybody who's sort of looking for something, that Ty did beyond, the horror genre, that's one I'll always recommend. But I will say it was, I sort of had this love-hate relationship with the series Them last year.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a punishment every time. It just seemed like a lot of my friends, who were, Black, that just, it was sort of traumatic for them. And it was just sort of like, it didn't reflect certain things the way that they wanted to be seen. And they wanted those stories to be told, which I completely respect. But I will say that Ty directed probably 2 of the best episodes of that season. In the way that he was able to handle that kind of material, was like, I was pretty shocked, because also it made me like angry at Pat Healy at times. And I don't want to be angry at Pat Healy.
Yeah.
Like, he's so evil in that show. And I was like, what are we doing here? But I just thought it was interesting, because I think one of the episodes, it's very Pat Healy centric. And I thought it was interesting that Ty was the one who directed it, because they had worked together, on the Innkeepers. And I was like, can't we just go back to the Innkeepers part 2 or something? Like,
just bring Sarah Paxton into it for this episode, and they can just hang out and it'll be nice.
Yeah. But and it's interesting too, because when I was talking to him, one of the things that Ty had mentioned that he was really, really proud of that he had done out, during his sort of episodic storytelling, John, was Tales from the Loop, which I still haven't had a chance to see. Based on what he was telling me, and based on how proud he was of that show, I was like, all right, I think I need to give this a shot. So I don't know. I think that one's also on Amazon. So
I think I've seen a little bit of it, but I haven't seen the whole thing.
Yeah, it seems Amazon, like, it's so hard to keep up with everybody's shows.
Yeah, everything just gets released so fast.
Yeah, there's so many.
I know. I remember thinking, like, when everything kind of went south with the pandemic, I was like, oh, everything's going to kind of slow down a little bit for us, right? No, it didn't.
We had some great horror since the pandemic. I mean, like you said, I was thinking, oh no, there's not going to be any more horror movies, to distract me from the world, spiraling into chaos. But we've had so much, and really, really good horror too. So
yeah, the past couple of years have been so fantastic for horror output.
Yeah, definitely. And I think ultimately too, one of my favorite things about X and about the work that Ty does in it is that, it ultimately is a love letter to independent filmmaking and the things that anybody goes through, regardless of what genre that they're working in order to create movie magic. And I think ultimately, like, whether or not you're into horror or you're into adult entertainment or whatever it is, I think coming away from this is something where it feels like this really endearing love letter to that process. And to me, like, I guess that's also another reason why I just felt completely enamored by it, because I just have such a respect for anybody who puts themselves out like that, because it is such a hard process. Even if I don't like a movie, I'm never going to crap completely on it, because movies are kind of a miracle. I can tell somebody it's not a great movie, but look, you got it done. You put in your work, that's more than some people can get done, so I'm never gonna, put anybody down for that. But yeah, I just think like it's a movie that I think is a perfect level, perfectly celebrates what we love about the genre, but also kind of transcends the genre too. And that sounds so hoity-toity.
But it's true though. I fully agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too.
I'm on your side.
Thank you.
I am too. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up there. But Michelle, where can people find you online?
Well, they can find me on Daily Dead for sure. I spend a lot of time on Twitter. Don't ask me why. And I also have a column about the paranormal on Play Disgusting.
Awesome. And what's your Twitter handle too, so people know where to follow?
Oh, it's Redhead from Mars, which I know makes no sense because I currently have pink hair, but just go with it. Just go with it. And I also have a piece that I'm really excited about on Wes Craven coming out in the next issue of Scream Horror Magazine.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, that's exciting. I can't wait to read it.
Oh, yay. Thank you. I'm really excited for it to get out there. I did some interviews with some really wonderful people who worked with him, and I can't wait to share the conversations. So, yeah.
Awesome. And how about for you, Emily?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Horrorella blog, and also on the Dead Ringers podcast. We just published an episode where we celebrated our co-host Ben McBride's birthday, and he programmed 4 movies for us to watch that just kind of, represented the essence that is Ben. It was good times.
Oh, that's awesome. 4 movies though. Boy, he put you guys to work.
Fortunately, we didn't have to watch them all at once, and we could spread them out however worked for our schedules. So we were all able to make it happen.
Nice. Excellent. And you, everybody, you can find me on Twitter over at The Horror Chick. And of course, I'm on Daily Dead. And sometimes I pop up over at Fangoria on the website. And speaking of X, as I mentioned, I got to do the cover story interview with Ty West for the upcoming issue, which I'm still not quite believing. And still 8-year-old me kind of freaks out every time I think about that. But yeah, you can find me there. And then of course, also Monsters Makeup and Effects Volume 1 is available now. You can find that pretty much everywhere that books are sold, which is pretty cool. And yeah, and I'm going to be wrapping up South by hopefully the next few days. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, but we really, for those of you who've been listening since day one, we really appreciate your support. And for those of you who are new to Corpse Club, we appreciate you coming along for the ride. And we hope that you've enjoyed our discussion of X. For more information on Corpse Club, you can head over to corpseclub.com for all your daily news, reviews, interviews, and that kind of fun stuff. You can head over to dailydead.com or follow us over on Twitter at Daily Dead News. And a huge thank you to our engineer, Brian, for making us sound awesome, although I'm not sure how much he's going to be able to do about the dogs. But we do appreciate his efforts nonetheless. And until next time, everybody, stay scary.